Hi, this is Chuck Matthews from Team Overkill, Matthews Racing, and I'm going to give you some insights on tires. It should be very applicable to anyone running an E-Street Miata, and maybe applicable if you're running something else as well. So I hope you find this interesting, and I hope you find it helpful. So hello, everyone. I'm going to apologize for the lighting here up front. Recording this from the Matthews Racing Mobile Command Center. I'm working at a remote location for work right now, and so to try to get the best possible sound, avoid background noises and whatnot, I'm using the microphone here, and hopefully that works out really well. So I've gotten a lot of requests for information about tires. What works really well, what doesn't work so well. And I had an opportunity at Nationals 2018 back here in September and to do a rather interesting tire test. It wasn't planned. It was definitely a last minute thing. Threw it together and got some very surprising results from it. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that this was far from being a perfect tire test. The variables were not controlled, as well as you would really hope. We weren't able to go back to the original set and see what differences were made. But I think it gives a reasonable approximation of things, and it also gives an interesting perspective. In addition to just raw times, I think the more interesting thing is the subjective things that Matt and I were able to learn by going out on these tires in very wet conditions. So let me look at my notes here. First of all, it was a pretty heavy rain, but it did let up a little bit when I was on the Continentals. So we tested BFGs, Continentals, and RE71Rs. So the Continentals did get the driest conditions, probably helped the time slightly. But I think the subjective information there was very, very good, and really kind of gave an idea for me to look back and say, okay, this is probably where the crossover point between a full wet and our normal street tires would be for fastest times. Another weird caveat, because of the tires that I had available at Nationals, I didn't want to put too many runs on the competition BFGs before we went out and did our Nationals runs. So these aren't my competition Nationals tires. These instead are a set of 245 45-15s mounted on regular stock 15x6 Miata wheels. The Continentals, however, were on SSRs, so a little bit lighter. The 71s were also on factory Miata wheels. So at least for those two, the comparison would have been, completely the same, which was really the intention. Find out what the difference between those two and the rain was. Am I really giving up a lot in wet conditions being on BFGs, which is, since the 1.5s has come out, has been my preferred tire. My testing has generally shown in E-Street for them to be faster with my driving style. So that's what we run. So what I'd like to do first is go over the subjective stuff. Matt did not do any alternating of the tires. He only was on the BFGs. but he was able to give me a good benchmark for what a good BFG time should be, and kind of figure out from there, am I putting in the type of times that I would expect going out on the test and tune course and testing things. So here's Matt's subjective thoughts on the BFG. In heavy rain, there was poor braking performance. However, they did put down power really well, keeping in mind this is a Miata, but they put down power well, except in tight turns. So I would say when the torsion is not able to really work well, like on a tight turn in the wet, that's where they seem to really struggle to put power down. They had good lateral grip and were very progressive in the rain. He said the braking was poor, but it was predictable. He said light braking was fine, heavy braking was not. He said the crossover between throttle and steer and brake and steer were both very, very predictable. I had some similar thoughts. I said, puts power down well. I said poor braking in puddles. I kind of thought that as long as it wasn't puddly, that their braking performance was absolutely fine. I thought they had decent lateral grip, and there was a good crossover between throttle and steering. The second tire that I tested, actually, let's go to the third tire tested so that you can kind of hear the Bridgestone and the rival back to back on those. So the RE71 I felt was not as progressive in the wet as the BFG was. The power down was not as good as the BFG. However, it was better at putting power down in the wet than the Continental, which I actually found to be very surprising. I thought the Continental would put power down in the wet better than either of them. And that absolutely wasn't the case. It was the worst at putting power down. 71 had really good lateral grip in the wet, and it had a decent crossover between throttle and steering, which I felt was actually slightly better than what the BFG was able to accomplish. The braking in the wet was slightly better than the BFG. The irony, though, was it was far less predictable in braking than either the BFG or the Continental. So while I could get better braking out of the Bridgestone, doing it consistently was harder. So lastly, on our subjective stuff, the Continental. So the Continental is extremely progressive. Super, super predictable, very easy to find the limit. However, it didn't put power down very well, but it did have excellent lateral grip. It had a poor crossover between throttle and steering. And in the wet, the braking was phenomenal. You could just dive way into the corner, grab the brakes, and make the corner really nice. Not a problem at all. The crossover between braking and steering was absolutely exceptional. And I made a lot of time on the tire by being able to brake very late and crossing over with some trail braking into the corners, and then just pure lateral grip in the wet was very, very good, which allowed me to make good time there as well. So, of course, you probably want to hear some times. So Matt went out first. He was on the Rival S 1.5. Like we said before, they were the 245s, which you would think would probably be worse in the wet than the 205s or the 225s, which are available. Like I said, that's the tire that we had available that I wasn't afraid to put runs on at the practice course. So that's what we used. He came out of the gate with a 44,593, as compared to my first run on them, which was a 45.0. His second run, well, actually, his second, third, and fourth runs were all within half a tenth. The fast one being a 43,442. He thinks there was a little more time out there, but he went a little too deep in the sweeper on the tire and wasn't able to find that time. I only did 3 runs on each tire, which was another key to making sure that I was driving the course well. He had more runs on the BFGs, and I think there were a couple other runs in there later that we didn't document because he, quite frankly, he was just putting down the same times over and over again. So, like I said before, my first run was a 45.0, a little bit slower than what Matt pulled off. Found a 43.7 on the second run. And then kind of in that 43.7, I had found the spots where, the strengths of the tire in the wet. And I managed to put down a 43.055 on the last run. So, a pretty solid time out of that tire. By comparison, the RE71 first run was a 44.1. So a little easier out of the box to find the limit. But my fastest time on that tire was a 43.3. And I thought that was just like all I could get out of the tire. It was, like I said, it was a lot harder for me to find the grip with that tire. It was harder for me. Maybe someone else, different driver, would find things differently. But I honestly think that for a wet tire, the Rival S 1.5 is really good and probably doesn't deserve some of the criticisms that it gets. My guess is that the compound is better for wet and that the tread pattern is not as good. But that's just a guess. Finally, the Continental. Like I said, the rain had let up just a little bit when we were doing it. First run on that one, this was the second tire I'd driven. It was a 42.983. So right out of the box, it was a little bit faster than the fastest BFG run. And by the third run, I'd knocked a whole nother second off. It was a 41.986. And it was a phenomenal tire to drive on. Like I said, the putting power down was really my biggest struggle with that tire. But the nice thing was you just didn't have to slow down as much. And when you did slow down, you could really take it deep into the corner and maximize the length of your straight. And it didn't unsettle the car because you could trail brake really deep into the corner. So, like I said, comments below. Tell me what you think. And was this useful, helpful? See you next time.